So we had the South Carolina Democratic debate on CBS on Tuesday night, and it was a mess. If I'm not mistaken, the previous two debates I referred to as probably the best debates in my opinion. This last one was by far and away the worst debate. So the reason for that is pretty simple. Everybody was desperate. Everybody, of course, but the front runner was desperate. And it was obvious. It was clear. It came through. There are no two ways about it. And there really aren't too many winners of the night. I would say it's mostly losers. I mean, first of all, the losers, you got to go moderators because the moderators just lost all control of that debate. And anybody watching was, thinking like, hey, could you make them fall in line, please? So moderators are probably the number one loser. And then of the candidates, probably the two biggest losers are Tom Steyer, or as Corin calls him, Tom Sawyer, who just kind of started blending in with the background, and people forgot he was there and probably forgot his name while he was standing on stage. And then also, it just hit me the other night, Mayor Pete is the Democratic Marco Rubio. That's what he is. Mayor Pete is the Democratic Marco Rubio. And that was apparent. He was just really grating on the nerves during this debate, and you could tell that his advisors told him beforehand, hey man, you're not doing well in the upcoming states in the polling, so you have to, make a name for yourself here. You have to plant a flag. You have to make a statement. And he goes out there, and all he does is filibuster people all day long. He's got his standard talking points, and he just tried to bulldoze everybody and just plow ahead. There were multiple different occasions where he would jump in, and then he would just go. And it was one of those things where everybody watching it could sense that the timing was off, could sense that he had no business jumping into the conversation, the back and forths happening between other candidates at those given points in time. And it was just so unappealing. There was something about it that was just so desperate and hacky, and I think it's not just me who had that feeling. I think it was most people. There was one point where even somebody in the audience screamed and told him to shut up because he kept filibustering. He kept jumping in at random times, and it was just really obnoxious. So, honestly, his campaign at this point is dead in the water. He's going nowhere. From here on out, it's, Nothingsville for Mayor Pete. Those were the two biggest losers. And then everybody else on stage just kind of was treading water, I'd say. And then here are the two biggest winners, in my opinion. Now, this is interesting. It's an interesting dynamic. And actually, it's not just me. The snap polls taken after the debate showed this as well. The two biggest winners are Bernie and Biden, believe it or not. So they both, they're winners, but they didn't have their best nights. Bernie, they just kept piling on him relentlessly over and over and with the same hacky stuff. How you going to pay for it? How you going to pay for it? How you going to pay for it? Oh my God, you said some positive words about Cuba. Oh my God, Cuba. And what they did is they would hit him, and then the moderators wouldn't let him respond to each individual attack. So he would just have to try to get a word in edgewise when he could. And when he did get a word in, he was, did a pretty good job at beating back the attacks on him. But it still wasn't fair because it was very lopsided in how they were addressed. And, he didn't get the chance to respond to each individual attack, so it was a little messed up in that respect. Now, Biden, his downside was there were 4 times that he would be giving an answer, and then he'd stop and start whining about the time he was allotted. And, everybody else goes over. Now, why do I even bother to follow the rules? But he did it, if you do that once, it could come across looking kind of macho and you're controlling the stage. Twice, okay, you're on the borderline now where it's not a good look. 3 or 4 times, and he may have even done it 5 times, and it's bro, come on, man. Instead of complaining about the time every time you give an answer, how about if we add up all the time that you complained about your lack of time, that right there is 1 minute and 30 seconds. Use that. Talk in that time frame. What's wrong with you? So even though Bernie and Biden were the winners, because outside of those two things, they had pretty good nights, they did have moments where it was they didn't do too well. But the bottom line is Bernie came into the debate a giant frontrunner, and nobody really put a dent in that. And, I think sometimes as a Bernie supporter, I'm a little too harsh on him. And I was thinking about this the other day. Bernie won Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. And the polls are showing actually now that he will likely lose South Carolina to Biden. That's what the polling shows. And I was thinking about it, and that makes me sad. But at the same time, it's like Donald Trump only won 41 states, or I should say 41 contests, because you have to include U.S. territories and whatnot in there. It's not just the states that vote. But Ted Cruz won 11, Marco Rubio won 3, John Kasich won 1. So even Trump, and he was relatively dominant in 2016. He still lost a decent number of contests. Let's see, what's the math on that? 11 plus 3 plus 1, that's 15. So he lost 15 contests. So, if Bernie loses South Carolina, that's not the end of the world. But bottom line is he went into that debate a giant front runner, and he goes out still a front runner. They tried to take his crown, but it didn't work because I think, for the most part, the attacks were so desperate and hacky that even your casual viewer looked at it and was like, y'all seem kind of desperate and hacky. So, I don't foresee much change after this debate, but according to the Snap polls, Bernie got, I think, 45% said he won. Biden was 43%, so right behind him. And then everybody else, was kind of fell way back. So it was Bernie and Biden were the two winners. And the unfortunate thing is, it is true that there was a new round of polling that came out of South Carolina, and there was a brief moment where Bernie was tied with Biden in South Carolina, but now the polls show Biden back to having a pretty big lead in South Carolina. Now, again, that's not the end of the world because Biden has put a lot of resources and a lot of time into South Carolina. Now, on Super Tuesday, that's a totally different story. Super Tuesday happens 2 days after South Carolina. And Biden is depending on a South Carolina bump to carry him on Super Tuesday. But the problem is Biden has no organization in any of the Super Tuesday states. In fact, last time he campaigned in a Super Tuesday state was over a month ago. He has one office in California. To put that in perspective, Bernie has 23. So he's kind of being ridiculous here. And even if he wins South Carolina, we'll immediately get a slap in the face right after on Super Tuesday. But, yeah, so the South Carolina debate was a complete and utter mess. I had to watch it twice for you guys, as I always have to do to get the specific clips that I want to discuss. But it was something else, man. We could have just done completely without that debate. It was not... It wasn't worth our time. It was nothing but a bunch of desperate hacks fear-mongering about Cuba and how you're going to pay for it and stuff like that. And they came for Bernie's crown, and they failed at getting it. And that's the upside of this. But at least according to the polls right now, it looks like he will lose in South Carolina. If he could keep it relatively close, that would be good, because at least that impacts the narrative moving forward. But I don't think, even if Biden wins big in South Carolina, I don't think the 2-day media bump is going to be enough to carry him at all in the Super Tuesday states, because he's way behind in the polling in virtually all the Super Tuesday states. So anyway, there's your breakdown, and I got to be honest with you guys, I'm getting a little sick and tired of these debates, and I kind of want them to stop.